Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, it is not a day where I want to talk about any specific book, but rather I want to do my usual end of the month wrap up and my TBR for the next month. In this case being the wrap up for May and the TBR for June. In terms of what I've read in May, I do think a lot of my time was taken up by Words of Radiance. It took me a good 2 or so weeks to get through the book. And although I did enjoy it, there were a number of problems, which I'll note later. It's very, it's very struggle bus with Brandon Sanderson's writing, because he's high quality at times, but he also has a number of flaws and just weird writing things that he does that seems only designed to take up time rather than deliver anything meaningful in the story. But again, I'll get to that in a few moments. And much like what I did in May, where I talked about Autumn Sonata, the movie that was directed by Ingmar Bergman. I talked about that with Lucas over at the Bits of Lit. Check out our video for the month of May. But much like that, we're going to be talking about another movie, RRR, Rise, Rise, Revolution, that sort of thing. Which I've seen before, but Lucas over at the Bits of Lit has not seen. I love the movie, and I hope that Lucas has a similar opinion. But it's no big deal if he doesn't, because it's always good to have conversations about movies and art and whatnot. So I look forward to hearing what he ultimately thinks about such things. I have a number of interesting books planned for June, so let's get to it. I will do the usual wrap-up, followed by the TBR. So what did I read for May? In terms of my books, I read a couple books, not a couple, but quite a few. Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. As I said before, it was good, but heavily flawed. I like the emotion that Sanderson puts into his characters and some of the writing. And I do like the way that he structures fight scenes, making them very compelling and getting you enraptured into them. However, the biggest problems that I've noted with Sanderson are the sort of like writing just for writing's sake without having any real purpose behind that writing. He's writing 1,300 pages of stuff for this particular story, and he wrote 1,200 pages in The Way of Kings, and it doesn't really seem like it needs to be that long. He's not using all of the space that he's given. Some of it's just like characters going on dates for some reason, and you've told us that it's the end of the world, so who has time to focus on dating and marriages and stuff like that when the end of the world is coming about? And then there's another problem with how he decides characters do things. In particular, one instance that I've noted in my review is that the character of Zeth, the assassin, tries to assassinate another character in the story, fails, and discovers some truth about one of the other characters, heads back to the person who ordered the assassination, is told that he still has to do the assassination, and is sent back to do it again. And the question is why? What is the purpose of all of that? If you're nothing is ultimately revealed in that moment where the character goes back to get new orders or something like that. So what purpose does it serve in the story other than to waste time, other than to keep a character out of a certain element? Because if that character was there, if that character was involved in the story, it would in another way, it would create headaches. So he's only doing it in an effort to prevent that character from having a role somewhere else, but he does it in a very unusual and just bizarre kind of way. Not that big of a fan, and I do think because of that, because it's just frustrating reading Sanderson, I'm going to take a break. I do intend to get through the Stormlight Archive series, but I don't want to waste more of my time with reading another 1,200 page book, because there's bound to be parts that are good, but there's also bound to be parts that are just a waste of my time. And I don't want to waste like 1,200 pages of my time when I could be reading something of far more interest, something that is better, better manages how it tells its own story. I also read Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, which I thought was fine. It was a good story, I think. I read that for book club, and both Bevan and I, Bevan, my friend Bevan, who doesn't have a channel yet, we noted that while there were some interesting tidbits here, she felt that Zauner was being purposely or not purposely, she felt that Zauner was being too specific in a way that suggests that no part of what she was saying could be true. And I felt like the opposite. I felt that Zauner was being weirdly vague in a way that she was trying to hide something. But either way, both Bevan and I have a problem with the way that Zauner chose to write certain aspects of the story. My question is if the story is about her mother partly, and certain years of Zauner's life would help reveal more about the character of her mother, why is she skipping over it? Why is she glossing over it? It doesn't really make sense to me. So I felt like that was a pretty major issue that didn't hinder my enjoyment of it, but it definitely raised a lot of questions. I also read volumes 3 and 4 of the Scott Pilgrim series, Scott Pilgrim versus the Universe and Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness. I did think that volume 3 was pretty solid, but volume 4 felt very meandering. It didn't really have much to say, and so it said very little. There's also an issue with queer baiting, or it could be queer baiting, but it could also just be Brian Lee O'Malley just being genuine and sincere in his portrayal of LGBT characters. But given the time that it was written, it still feels like queer baiting at times. So I do intend to finish the series, but it's clear at this point that the movies that were made were a vast improvement over the books. The books are pretty good, but the movies were made improvements on the story and what they chose to omit about Scott that made it much more palatable, I think. And then I also read Grease Monkey by Tim Aldred. I thought it was pretty boring. I didn't talk about it on the channel because there wasn't really a whole lot to it. And I checked it out from my local library, so I wasn't really expecting it to be life-changing, but it certainly didn't really have much to say. I also read Fly Girl by Omar Tyree, just yet another book in this month where it was kind of bizarre, strange writing. And I had a lot of negative things to say in my review, and I'm willing to concede in some part that maybe I'm judging it by the standards of white literature. It's a very white criticism, whereas black authors could be trying to say different things and using different styles of writing. But that said, there's a lot missing with the themes that they're touching upon and connecting the ideas in the story. And even if black literature has different a different style of writing or something like that, it should still be good. And so I'm left thinking that the bizarre writing and whatnot indicate a lack of quality somewhere. And I'm really hoping that I can find more, black literature, modern black literature, or urban literature, as the publishers call it, that is high quality, because I haven't really found it, and I don't want to just be like, oh, this isn't a good genre. I know that there is some good writing out there, and I am very determined to find it. And I also read volumes 2 and 3 of Berserk by Kentaro Miura. Both were really great, probably the best stories of the month that I read, although Words of Radiance could also compete for that in some regards. But I really loved volumes 2 and 3 for their art, for the themes that Miura is building upon, and for the overarching story of both Guts as well as the people that he's trying to help. I think it's a pretty solid series, and I can't wait to explore more. I also read a number of short stories for the month of May, including Jambula Tree by Monica Arakdenieko, an interesting LGBT type story of sort of coming of age realization of your homosexuality in Uganda and the problems that exist with sort of realizing it in that culture. So I thought it was pretty solid. Definitely recommend it to you out there. I also read Cabbage Patch Mother, which I thought was okay. Didn't really do anything too special, but it was a serviceable story. I also read The Mark on the Wall by Virginia Woolf, which was pretty good. I really enjoy Virginia Woolf's writing, and there seems to be a lot there to latch onto. And I really look forward to reading more from Virginia Woolf in the future. And then I also read Miriam by Truman Capote, which was truly good. One of the probably the best short story of the month, although I feel like it's competing with The Mark on the Wall by Virginia Woolf. But I really liked Capote's sort of analysis or psychological exploration of this woman who feels that like she's slowly losing her mind because of the shenanigans of a young girl. So I definitely recommend that you go seek it out without having read anything before, because it's a pretty fascinating story. And then I also read a number of poems. Check out my Poetry Thursday videos to get more of an understanding of what I talked about with them. But what do I plan on reading for the month of June? I have a number of books, short stories, and poems planned. I'm currently in the process of reading Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. As you know, you probably, if you're familiar with my channel, you know that I love Neil Gaiman. A big fan of the Sandman series and Stardust and a couple of other of his stories. Although I will admit, sadly, that this book kind of isn't doing it for me. I'm very near to the end, and it feels like it's Gaiman not at his best, which is unfortunate. I'm also reading Spy X Family, which is a manga recommended to me by one of my friends. What's also funny is that I was talking about it at work, and one of the student workers said, "Oh, I've read Spy X Family. It's really good." And so we had a little bit of a conversation about manga there. So I feel like if I need to figure out if any manga is high quality, I can always look to my student workers, apparently, which is good, because I always love talking about books and whatnot. So it's fun to find those groups of people who want to chat about what they're interested in. And then I also plan on reading Bridge to Terabithia, which is a classic book in young adult fiction. I read part of it when I was younger, but I don't think I ever finished it. I have seen the movie though, and I enjoyed that. What's interesting is that Bridge to Terabithia is a Newbery Medal winner, and if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, once again you know that I'm a big fan of those Newbery Medal winners, as I feel it's somewhat of an indicator of quality based on what I've read thus far, whether it be Holes or A Light in the Dark, or A Wish in the Dark, or something like that, or The Girl Who Drank the Moon, or something like that. So I'm looking forward to reading this one, even though I know the tragic ending that awaits me. I also plan on reading You Can't Be Serious by Cal Penn. This is a book club read from my friend Bevan again. She chose to read it. She's very thematic with her book picks based on the month, and Cal Penn in this memoir acknowledged that he was gay. So that's the LGBT Pride Month kind of connector right there. But Cal Penn is in a couple movies that I have found to be of interest, including Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. So this should be a very interesting book if he touches upon any aspect of his film career, which, I mean, that's a large part of his life. So I'm hoping he touches upon that. I'm also gonna read and hopefully talk about Quarantine Princess by Meg Cabot. I made plans to read it last month, but I never got around to it. So hopefully Quarantine Princess is high quality, or at least it gives me a lot to be mad about, as typical with Meg Cabot's other writings. I also want to read Evicted by Matthew Desmond. Again, I think I planned to read that last month, but I never got around to it. This is another recommendation from my friend Bevan, so that should be fun. And then I also want to read The Last Temptation of Christ by a Greek author whose name I'm forgetting. I'll put it up there. But yeah, it's seen as a classic. It was later adapted into a movie with Willem Dafoe, and it's also a banned book. And again, that's another thing I'm very interested on this channel, is finding those banned books and talking about why people might actually be trying to ban them, which isn't always the reason that they say they want to ban them. I also have a number of library reads that I plan on reading, but in terms of short stories, there are a couple of authors that I want to check out for the month of June, including Joyce Carol Oates, who is an author that I've heard many things about, and I think Lucas over at the Bits of Lit has praised her in the past, but I've never read anything by Joyce Carol Oates, which is surprising given her popularity. But this might also be a Virginia Woolf type thing where it's a popular author that I've just never bothered to get to for one reason or another. And then I also want to read Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu, which I've heard many things about but never actually read. I'm very familiar with the Cthulhu mythos, but I want to see where the origins are of it, so I'm looking forward to that. And then I also want to read some poems, of course, but I'm doing the sort of pride exploration of authors between late May and the end of July, as I frequently mention, exploring lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, aromantic, all types of poets from one from all walks of life and whatnot. So it was high quality last year, and it's proving to be high quality this year as well. Anyway, that was the usual wrap up and TBR. If you have any comments on something that I plan on reading, or if you want to make a recommendation to me, let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about books, and let's talk about those interesting recommendations that you think I might like. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and join the Discord if you want to have further conversations about books or interesting authors. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and June-based travels. Farewell.